15 minutes of workplace chatter you want to overhear. Welcome to the Friday 15 with your host, Paul Mastrangelo of First Domino Consulting and Jeff Jilton of Spencer Stewart.
Hey, Paul. Just feels like just a minute since I last seen you.
Time does fly when I'm not with you, Jeff.
Definitely, definitely. Well, here we are later in the month of February, and it is picking up our conversation where we were. So we were last really kind of getting into aggression and incivil behaviors at work. And where I was picking up right at the end thread there, it was what is the role of the manager in this particular case? Should we be expecting managers to step in and uh, prevent or stop these situations? Like, what is their responsibility? Are we trying to make them like the cops, the referees? Like, how would you think this is part of the manager's job to control instability and aggression in their teams or in the workplace in general, and leaders too, like what they're supposed to do with their culture?
Well, it's a sad state of our society that we even have to have this conversation, but I think it absolutely is the job of any people leader, high ranking or frontline supervisor, to consider what's going on. We could talk about this in two buckets. We could talk about it in terms of preventing, and of course, even that's a continuum, but the prevention of aggression in our team, in our workplace, in our organization, versus intervention. It's occurring, and now what do we do about it? Um, I'll tell you what, I'll tackle the prevention side of it, and I'll try to
Okay.
be quick and let you ring in on that, and we'll see what we can do with intervention after that. On the prevention side, so I'm making a bunch of assumptions here. Obviously, in 15 minutes, we can't come up with something that's going to work for all time now. Hey, does that make you mad that that we can't solve violence and aggression? Well, okay. Um, so let's make some assumptions. A lot of what, certainly the most violent forms of aggression, it's rarely a random event. There is usually someone who feels wronged. There is some sort of fairness or injustice that they are reacting to. Again, in their minds, this could be real or perceived, but in their minds, it's not fair, and that's why they lash out. Um, so one avenue is when you feel that there's something that's escalating, and when you see this escalation, whether that's over time or in a like in a meeting, let's say, and something's ramping up very, very quickly, there are some scenarios that I think we could, or some pieces of advice. So I'm going to list off some things. One, empathy, right? So listening with empathy, trying to understand what the other person perceives is the issue. And of course, that can be difficult. But if you're coming at me, if you're blaming me for something, I've got to react to that in a very calm way. And so I might have to think sort of like in a meta way. Oh, Jeff is really upset, and it's starting to get dicey here. I need to make sure that my rate of speech, my tone, and my verbal reactions are calm. And
Mhm.
I've got to make sure, and I want to use your name. Jeff, I do understand what you're telling me. I understand that you're thinking about what happened in our meeting and how it came across to other people. I get what you're saying, Jeff, right? So we want to personalize it as much as possible. Um, we want to make sure that we're respecting personal space as much as possible. And then we want to set limits. Now, the set limits,
Mhm.
yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Um, but so we're blending prevention and intervention here, right? But here's the one I wanted to talk about: setting limits on what you'll stand for. Not that I've ever been in a hostage scenario or anything like that, but certainly when you watch it on TV, a lot of times there'll be someone, the negotiator, who's setting a boundary. No, we're not going to do that, Jeff. Jeff, that's something I can't let you do. But here's what I can do. This idea of setting a boundary, but then coming back with something, offering something. That sense of obligation. If I offer you something, there's a sense it's socially or psychologically, it's basically saying, okay, then you also have to meet me halfway.
Right.
So again, I don't know if that's prevention in the moment or prevention long term, but that's an acute situation and some of the things that I came up with. I'll let you
Yeah,
run
like
with this.
you also give you something to replace a negative with something positive, which is really powerful. And I do want to just really make a really clear distinction because I think it's very powerful. And so you mentioned empathy, but I really want to say what you're really talking about is sympathy. And the reason I'm making that distinction is people do talk about empathy, and that really means you're kind of taking that person's emotion and energy on, and that can lead to kind of burning out. So we can be very sympathetic, and you were giving a really good example of that. Like I hear what you're feeling without saying, oh, like, yeah, I feel like that would really upset me. I'm really upset too, right? It's just I understand why you're upset,
Which
which
could come across as inauthentic too. It's like, oh,
right.
I so agree, right? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I just, but really good suggestion. I think from the intervention, I think it is definitely again where we always fail managers is we lack training them. I think there are things that we can train managers on in terms of looking for those early signs of disrespect or the things to listen for,
Mhm.
um, and then how to manage some of those things like you were just teaching us around, um, you know, avoiding that defensiveness and cooling things down. One of the things that I think why people get spiraled into some of their it probably perceived lack of fairness or perceived injustice. I mean, it's a lot of what you see on TikTok and YouTube, a lot of the videos that you see out there. Lindsay Ellis, if you know who she is, she's a great like a documentarian on Nebula, I think is where she is now. She talks about some of this with the um, the police videos, but the people when they feel like they're being in lack of justice, that's where you see some of this hostility. And so being able to address you know fairness and being able to make sure you're creating an environment where people understand the why, where they understand where everyone does kind of feel they're being treated fairly or have a venue to express when they feel that those inequities can probably help keep that temperature down, as well as being sensitive to just sort of microaggressions. And those are something that even I still struggle like, what does that really sound like? What does that mean? And it's really helpful every once in a while just being reminded of just little stupid things that we say that can trigger or set someone off without even kind of realizing it. And so just learning how to be kind of mindful of it. You still do it, but then just reading the room, being sensitive that someone might have been disrespected by that. So I think that's it. So from the intervention, and then the other side of it is, if it does happen, can you make it safe to report or make it easy for people to make harassment reports, because a lot of these things do go underreported. So which probably leads us to our next point, which is, okay, we're preventing or we're intervention, but you can't change what you don't measure. So I think the last
Yeah.
of it is really what is the best way to, you know, measure this out, or um, you know, track this on the long term.
Well, and in a way, Jeff, what you're saying is it is a preventative measure in the sense that we're going to, 'cause, so let's talk about measuring these aggressive behaviors unless we're able to have some sort of objective, cameras or things like that, which are highly unlikely. We're talking about self-report. We're talking about surveys.
Which, by the way, cameras and monitoring and all that were listed as one of the factors to workplace hostility and aggression. So just noting that little tidbit
Because it
of
doesn't seem fair, right? The
right.
idea of my performance is not based on being in front of this camera. Yes, great point. Great point. So, if we're talking about survey measures, and I know you and I have probably given this speech, when you have a survey that goes to employees, it's doing two things. It is communicating to the employees, these things are important to us. We are paying attention. We don't want it. This is what we're talking about. So, in a way, that is a form of prevention. But what, of course, the more obvious purpose is we're trying to collect data. And right, so now we got to use the two-word phrase that must be used in all conversations: psychological safety. Ding, 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 ding. All right. Uh,
Ooh, the
exactly. Balloons come down. You
chicken.
just said the secret word. No one's going to get that reference, by the way. So
I
you
know
and
it's
I can
like
have a chuckle about
it's like
Groucho.
55,000 euros. Yes, yes.
Yes.
So
But
let's
anyway, psychological safety. I mean, a lot of the people who are being victimized likely don't trust the system, don't trust management, don't trust the survey. However, the best thing that we could do is to use that survey to start to collect that. I guess there's other options as well. A lot of organizations will have a like a hotline, right? So you can call this to report quote unethical behavior, which is a very broad spectrum. Again, I guess that's another sad statement about how horrible we are in the workplace, but nevertheless, that's another outlet. So to your point, by understanding more about what are we trying to chase after, what are we seeing as the baseline for these aggressive behaviors, now at least we can start talking about that. And that means we can start talking about injustice as well, and we can talk about ways that we can let off some steam. What does that look like?
yeah, no, I think there's more than just surveys that can be leveraged, but I definitely love, sometimes there's a lot of power in just knowing what the baseline is. And, I have a client where we looked at, just the comfort of reporting and the comfort that something is going to happen with that report. And seeing, it's a fairly high baseline. It was like 85%, but that means 15% is still skeptical. And so understanding what's going on with the 15%, and is that some special population, and some things that we could, can close the gap there. So there are things that we can learn just in that regard. And then, as leaders and managers, there are just other things that may be reflective, like, with customers, are we tracking customer complaints or complaints against customers? Are we managing and making sure we're tracking things like that as well? And if you are going to have a hotline or a reporting system, how are you really showing that you're doing something with that information? Because again, there's no value to it if people don't think anything's really going to happen with it, because then they won't bother making the complaint.
You said a couple things, Jeff, that I think are worth underlining. One is the idea of, in terms of unfairness, trying to become an advocate for someone, which I know is bordering on what you suggested could be dangerous, right? Too much empathizing takes on the load of that person. But the idea of making you feel like, well, let me see if I can help you. let me see what I can do for you is nice. And the other thing, which is a bit of a downer to end our episode today, but we were talking a couple weeks ago um, about diversity in the workplace. And these statistics are a little bit old, so I don't know if they're still holding, but statistics I looked at is that violence is disproportionately aimed at women, minority members, and messengers of bad news, which in many ways might be human resource professionals who might be on our listening in our audience. So that is a very sad way for us to uh, end, and therefore, gosh, and that's why I can't find the gong. The gong is.
Oh, Paul, I feel your frustration there. I'm very sorry you can't find the gong. It's okay. It's okay. Uh, well, this has been a good shot. Good chat. We'll maybe come up with something a little more uplifting to head into March with. But for now, thanks everyone for taking the time to listen to us chatter on for 15 minutes. Hope you all have a great weekend.
Yeah, stay with each other as a team. Let's not turn on each other because when we are with other people, that gets us through tough times. And so let's try to be kind and courteous out there. So have a good Friday, have a good weekend.
Cheers.